Hello, Bob Rietfeld here, preaching and teaching minister of the Spring Hill Christian Church of rural Ocklawackney, Georgia, and welcome to another lesson in Survey of the Old Testament. Today our lesson is about the book of Judges. I'll be giving you just a brief overview of the book of Judges and what you should expect to find in that particular book, as well as I'm going to give you a list of the chronology of the Judges. Joshua and the elders between 1406 and 1385 BC. I'm going to give you the name of the oppressor, the king at that particular time, the estimated date, the reference for all the judges, who the judge was, which tribe the judge was from, and for how long, and a place of battle if that was relevant or applicable. The first one, the judge was, there was a judge by the name of Othniel, and he was judge between 1385 and 1337 BC. He was from the tribe of Judah, and he was in place for 40 years. The king at that time was Cushan Rishathaim of Mesopotamia, who the oppressor was. The oppressor was Mesopotamia. And the second judge was Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was a judge for 80 years. Between 1319 and 1239, between 1337 and 1239 BC. He was again from the tribe of Benjamin. The king was Eglon of the Moabites, who was the oppressor. The battle, there was a battle, the Battle of Jericho. Then there was Shamgar, who was judge between 1260 and 1250 BC. He was judge for 10 years, and the oppressor was the Philistines. Then there was the judge of Deborah, who was from the tribe of Ephraim, was judge for 40 years between 1239 and 1199 BC. She was, there was a battle in Esdraelon, I believe that's pronounced, and the king at that time was Jabin. The Canaanites were the oppressors for that. And so these can be found in Judges chapter 3 and 4. Sorry, I forgot to give those to you. Starting with Judges 3:8 all the way up through chapter 5, verse 31 of the book of Judges. And then a judge was Gideon was a judge from the tribe of Manasseh. He was a judge for 40 years, from 1199 BC to 1152 BC. And the kings during that particular time was Oreb, Zeeb, Zeba, and Zalmunna from the Midianite tribe. They were the oppressors, and there was a battle on the hill of Morah. There was a civil war of Abimelech, the king there, and he was killed at Thebez. That was a period that's talked about in Judges chapter 9 between 1152 and 1149 BC. 1149 to 1126 during this time. Tola was a judge from the tribe of Issachar, and between 1126 and 1104, talked about in Judges 10 as well. Jair was the judge. He was from the tribe of Gilead. Issachar was a judge for 23 years, and Gilead was judge for a period of 22 years. although both of those were, or all three of those, Gideon, Tola, and Jair, were judges during a time of civil war, during the time of Abimelech. Then between 1104 and 1086, it's talked about in Judges chapter 10 as well. Gilead was the tribe Jephthah was the judge, the tribe Gilead. And there was a battle during this time in the Transjordan. The Ammonites were the oppressors. The Ammonites were oppressors from about 1104 to 1055 BC. And you could read about that in Judges chapters 10 through 12. And during that time period, there were 4 judges. Jephthah, as I said, was the first one. Ibzan, the second. Elon was the third. And Abdon was the fourth. Jephthah was from the tribe of Gilead. Ibzan was from the tribe of Judah. Elon was from the tribe of Zebulun. And Abdon was the tribe of Ephraim. Each one lasted, between 5 and 10 years. Jephthah 6 years, Ibzan 8 years, Elon 10 years, and Abdon was a judge for 7 years. And then they were under the oppression of the Philistines for about 40 years. You can read about that in Judges chapter 13 through chapter 16. And during that particular time, Samson was the judge from the tribe of Dan, and he was the judge for about 20 years. So there were a lot of different battles during the Judges period. There was a battle of the opponent. I'll give the opponent of the battle first, and who they battled against, and where you can find that in Scripture. The battle was against Bezek, against Judah in Judges 1. The opponent was Kiriath Arba or Hebron against Judah, and that was located in Hebron in chapter 1. You can find that. And then Kiriath Sefer or Debir was the opponent, and Judah was the victor of that as well. The location was in Debir in chapter 1. And then there were just some battles in some various cities against Judah, and that can be found in chapter 1 as well. And then the opponent was Luz of Bethel. The victor was Manasseh and Ephraim. The battle was fought in Bethel. That can be found in chapter 1 as well. There is the opponent Laish. That a victor was the tribe of Dan. The battle was in Laish. That can be found in Judges 18. And then there was the Israel versus the Benjamites, kind of a civil war type thing. The victor was Israel. The location was Gibeah. That can be found in Judges chapter 20. Then the opponent was Mesopotamia against Israel in Judges chapter 3. The opponent was Moab against Israel. The battle was in Jericho in Judges chapter 3. The opponent of Israel was Hazar in chapter 4. The opponent of Midianites against Israel in chapter 7 and 8. Then there was a civil unrest between Abimelech and Shechem, and they were the opponents against. Abimelech was the victor there, and it was the battle that was in Shechem in chapter 9. Then there was a civil war between Abimelech and Thebez. Israel was the victor. Thebez was the location. That's in chapter 9 as well. And then you have an opponent, the Ammonites, against Israel. The location of the battle was in Transjordan. That's found in chapter 11. and then there was another civil uprising between the Gileadites and the Ephraimites. Gilead was the victor. The location was Zaphon, and that can be found in Judges chapter 12. So, having said that, I want to just give you just a brief overview of the book of Judges. The author is believed to be Samuel. The Jewish Talmud of the 2nd century says that he wrote it. However, it may have been another of the prophets somewhere between 1100 and 700 BC. The meaning, Judges gets its name from the 12 individuals who served as judges or deliverers of Israel for approximately 300 years after Joshua died. The key verse is chapter 21, verse 25, where it says, "Every man did what was right in his own eyes." And the key word to the book is deliverance. Remember, Israel was loyal to God 3 of every 4 years recorded in Judges. And we see the same pattern seen again and again throughout the book of Judges. The decline, forget God, discipline through some oppressing nations, and then deliverance by raising up a judge. You had forgetfulness, failure, flogging, and forgiveness. Rebellion, ruin, repentance, and restoration. Sin, servitude, sorrow, and salvation. Relapses, results, and restorals. Kind of a preacher's theme throughout that. The key concept, failure, forgiveness, deliverance. God's methodology equals people. And so the date, Judges 18:31, seems to suggest the early days of Samuel at God's house at Shiloh, 1100 BC. If Samuel wrote it, it was probably about 1000 BC. Judges 17:6 implies the time of kings in Israel was 1000 BC. Psalm 76:71 may tie it to the time of the Philistine captivity. Not sure when, to 1050 BC. Judges 18:31 implies the date of first captivity of the northern kingdom was in 740 BC. The recipients were the Israelites in the time of Samuel. And the purpose of the book of Judges, it's a book of war, where God was contending with the sin in the hearts of the people. It's a historical narrative from a religious perspective, not secular. It's not a comprehensive picture of the total life of Israel, but a selection of events from the moral and religious life which point out present-day lessons to us from history. Show that a man without God is a failure. The key phrase in Judges comes from Judges 21:25 or 17:6. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. And Deuteronomy 12:8 condemns this philosophy. Anarchy is something that was talked about in there, equals failure. Religious failure brings political and social breakdown in any nation. The contents of Judges, it has 3 main divisions. Chapter 1 and 2, the meaning of history. Chapters 2 through 16, the history of the judges. And chapters 17 through 21, 2 added stories. Judges contains one of the goriest stories in all of literature. At Gibeah, a concubine was raped by men of the city and died. Levite dissects the body and sends various parts all over Israel with a plea for justice. Israel soldiers then killed all but 600 of 26,000 Benjaminites. And this is only after the Benjaminite killed 22,000 and 18,000 of Israel on 2 previous days. I talked about already the list of the judges and who their oppressors were. Some of the lessons that we can learn from the book of Judges is that religious failure brings political and social breakdown and failure in any nation. Politics, strategy, diplomacy, social reform are of no use. They cannot save a nation when the nation turns its back on God. That's a lesson that we could learn today, obviously. Another lesson is that God always wants a remnant, or God always has a remnant through which he can work. And then God forgives the penitent over and over and over and over. He doesn't wish anybody to perish. Never work to marry a drunkard to reform him. Israel left heathens in the promised land, tried to get along rather than drive them out as commanded, and the result was continued idolatry. Another lesson, God uses men to accomplish his work. He could do it another way, but he raises up men through whom he can work. Another lesson is the need for link between and the cooperation of the poetic inspirer and the practical organizer. Deborah and Barak are examples. And then the seriousness of making a vow to God. Do it very carefully. Example, Jephthah. Excuse me. So that's just a brief summary and overview of the book of Judges. I hope that this motivates you to read the book of Judges and to maybe learn some things from it and to just dive into it a little bit more in depth. And so I hope that this has been something that will motivate and inspire you to do that. I hope you've enjoyed this overview as much as I've enjoyed presenting it to you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and may God bless you.